Hello and welcome all you vital relevant people. Ladies, I'm so happy that you have come, and I love this way of doing things because I don't have to leave home, and neither do you. And so today I just want to start out by saying please click the link in the description box and go to the blog where I have embedded this video and see the things that go with, plus the links and other things that I provide is just more detailed, and you're able to leave you can leave a comment. You can even leave a little contribution if you want. It's not required. So ladies, today we'll start with the usual thing, and that is to get dressed. Do your best to get dressed, and I just wanted to find something that I could say that I hadn't said before about the importance of dressing for the home. And one of the things that crossed my mind today was that we need to give the word homemaker some dignity and give it a different look, so that when someone says I'm a homemaker, the look on the other person's face doesn't go like, oh, they start adding up: homemaker, stay at home, do nothing, sit around in your sweat clothes, get fat, etc. And so we need to give it some dignity. And when you're out and about, and you will be, it's not like we're in confined. It's not like it's confined and unvarying. It's and it's not like it's a confinement, locked up or in a prison or anything like that, because we do have to go out. In fact, many women I've heard tell me that they just wish they could actually stay home and not have to be going to do errands, pick up groceries, or these last minute things they have to do because of unexpected turn of events. And so you want to dress as though you are courting something. I was looking through all the paintings of Edmund B. Layton, which I enjoy looking at so much. He didn't actually live in the Regency era, but he painted from the Regency era, the medieval era, and other eras, and he often had paintings called courting, and the women and men were dressed to impress a little bit, but not overly dressed. It was casual. It wasn't completely formal. And he said he had gone away to paint, because at the time the world was in chaos, as it always is, and he had just, to me, looking at his life and the paintings that he produced, must have just gone away and focused on making beautiful paintings. And this is what we have to do with our dress, ladies. We have to dress as though we're courting something good in life. We're courting happiness. We're courting pleasantness. And so you have to dress up as though you're kind of on a courtship. And so the simplest place to practice that would be your home, but then would be the grocery store. Everyone goes to the grocery store. If you don't and you have things delivered, it's still nice to meet someone at the door in nice clothes. But we ladies of a vital age, you still have to remember, I know everyone's really down on the young because they dress so immodestly, but vital women have to dress modestly too. And they forget. And married women too. You forget that you have to cover more than you show. So too much flesh is out of balance with the amount of cloth you cover yourself with. I like sleeves. My arms aren't in perfect condition, and I don't want to display my arms, especially my upper arms, until I get fit. Even then, I'm not sure, because I like sleeves. So I think ladies of a vital age need to be careful about that. If you're not perfectly in perfect condition or perfect fit, the dress is a wonderful, wonderful disguise. I like the dress because it is one piece. I don't have to shuffle around picking the top and the skirt, or shuffle around with these separates. And I like the fact that the blouse is already connected to the skirt, and it's easy for me, and I can always add a little jacket. And so I would say, you ladies at home especially, is very important when you have children to be modest. They're going to see things, they're lower than you, they're down on the floor, and so think about what you're doing when you dress. and be modest around them and teach them to be modest too. They'll go by your example, we hope, for a long time. And so I want to also say that it isn't just the grocery store, it's other places that you might be in public that are just normal part of your life. And so we vital women especially have to be an example. There's no point in complaining about the way the fashions are, the styles are, what women are showing these days if we are going around. It's not just modesty, it is dullness. You cannot go around looking like you don't care and wearing clothes that don't look good on you, or let's say I'm trying to think, the modern t-shirt and stretch pants just never were flattering to everybody. It only kind of worked on a really fit woman. But then we get the vital people, the elderly people, those women are still wearing those things because they got used to them and they're comfortable. But they don't necessarily, like I said before, this is the only ministry you might have. You might not be able to talk to anybody, but it sends a message of what people your age think and feel, and how they feel about life. And so I want to quote something from Wives and Daughters. And first, let me share my tea with you today. I am drinking something called Rose and Mint Herbal Tea. And it comes from, and I love the smell of it, and especially scenting the room. And and it actually tastes pretty good. It's by Bigelow. And I like the color of goes with my dress, doesn't it? The color of the box. And so I wanted to share that with you. And before I get to what Claire said, I want to read this Tea Time magazine that just came. And it's for May and June 2024. It might be on your newsstand. If you subscribe to it, it ends up being $5 an issue. If you buy it off of the shelf at the grocery store or Walmart, it's going to be $10. But when you get one of these, it's a book, and you keep it. And sometimes I'll have extra copies that I want for a friend. And the first thing I like to do is turn to one of the front pages. They always make sure these people are so clever. One of the first pages is something that has nothing on it but a picture, and it just feeds your love of beauty. And so I wanted to read an article in here. It's called Is It Time? And this is the recent one. So if you get this is interesting. And also I wanted to tell you about Tea Time magazine, because it also, if you're homeschooling, and my boys used to like this Tea Time magazine. They like take a trip, like this is to the Carolinas, and they take a trip and they stop at the tea plantations. They also show a lot of ancient architecture and historical places. This is full of paintings of tea drinking. See here, you probably recognize some of that. I'll try to put some of that on the blog for you so you can see. But I want to read this article called Is It Time for Another Tea Rebellion? This is apparently written to Americans, but other places too. And what the author is trying to say, and his name is Bruce Richardson. And his whole idea is that while people are cognizant of how hot coffee should be, they seem to be really negligent when it comes to tea. And even if you don't drink tea, when you want a hot drink, you want it to be hot, don't you? So let's listen to this. And it wasn't necessarily about Americans this time, but Americans just have a real problem connecting with things being hot when it comes to tea, unfortunately. And in the front of this magazine, every time, it shows you different kinds of tisanes and herbals that don't require so much heat, and some that do. They always have a page that displays these teas. I don't know if this issue does or not, but I always appreciate it when they do that. So I hope you'll find something to do while you're listening today. I only have maybe one other thing to show you, and then you can be busy while I read. I use literature and I use books because that way I won't be talking about anybody in real life, and they often represent situations in real life in some of these stories. So here's the article, Is It Time for Another Tea Rebellion? I recently traveled to Portugal, where I produced a photo story on the country's re-emerging love of good tea. Portuguese explorers first brought Chinese tea to Europe and eventually into the royal palace of St. James. I shared this tidbit of tea history with British tourists who filled the hotel. It wasn't long before guests heard that I was in the hotel to shoot an afternoon tea story, and they pleaded with me to ask the staff to turn up the heat on the tea kettle. We want piping hot, strong tea, they told me. After all, we are British. Each morning, our breakfast tea was served in metal rather than ceramic. You know, the reason that I have the automatic shut-off tea kettles that shut off as soon as it boils in every single room here at the manse is so that no one can complain about the temperature of the tea. It's up to them. It'll shut off after it has boiled, and it always reaches a boiling point. And in some of the tea time magazines, the front pages have pictures of different kinds of teas with the temperature. And some of the automatic shut-off tea kettles do have temperatures on them. Mine don't. So, every morning our breakfast tea was served in metal rather than ceramic teapots, which caused the water to cool at the table quickly. But the reason they use metal is that it's sturdy, it won't break, and they don't have to replace anything, and it'll probably go in the dishwasher okay. So people are using metal teapots, but you know, I have been served in plastic, and plastic, I don't know, it's vinyl or plastic teacups too. Oh, it's awful. The tea just tastes awful in that. And after you've paid so much at a restaurant and they serve that to you, it's just, you know, I don't even go out anymore. I just stay home. It's better at the manse. Which causes the water to cool on the table quickly. But the water temperature wasn't the only hindrance to good tea here. The tea bags were from a reputable British brand, but contained a blend of small, low-grade leaves. As a result, the steeped tea lacked body. The tea service would benefit from using the same purveyor's loose tea and steeping the leaves loose in a ceramic pot. The average British tea drinker doesn't care if the tea leaves are oversteeped, because most add milk to the tea. Now here in America, the U.S., we drink everything black. Black coffee, black tea, everything's black. Once in a while, I notice people will put a little milk in their tea, but the average person, no matter if it's a tisane or a herbal or a black tea or a green tea, they don't add anything to it. Americans love to add honey, though, which is just particularly a no-no in some places, but they like to put honey in it. I guess it brings out the flavor. The average tea drinker doesn't care if the tea leaves are oversteeped because they add milk to their tea. We don't, so we don't like our tea to get too strong. Many of my new friends went on to vent their frustration in trying to find a good cup of tea when they toured the United States. I assured them we were making progress, and tea was having a decades-long renaissance here, or renaissance, and most restaurants and hotels still neglect their tea presentation. That is so sad. I've worked in the tea profession for more than 30 years, and I am frustrated that food and beverage managers spend countless hours training staff on wine service and then pay little attention to their tea offerings. Most servers have learned the correct temperatures to serve red or white wines, so why can't they be taught the correct temperatures to steep black or green teas? The main culprit is that coffee suppliers often don't know beans about tea. So see, the coffee suppliers bring in the tea also, stock the shelves right next to each other. I see that at the grocery store. I see them unpacking. They're unpacking the coffee and the tea. So they don't know anything about tea, but they're basically coffee suppliers. So I suggest the restaurants order directly from a knowledgeable tea blender who is happy to train the staff. It might be time for tea drinkers to demand better service and command respect for our devotion to good tea. On the heels of last year's celebration, the 250th anniversary of Boston's most famous tea party, perhaps we should compose a Bill of Rights for tea drinkers. I'll begin with a short list of grievances that should be brought to the attention of the hospitality industry. I hope you will share this list of demands and join me in instigating a long overdue rebellion. Samuel Adams would be proud. You know, I take these little tea kettles with me when I go anywhere, and if we have to stay somewhere, I'll take my own tea kettle, my own bottle of water, and I'll make sure that I get my cup of tea. So as a matter of fact, the only nightmares I ever have are that I can't get a shower, that we're in somewhere where there's no hot water and I can't get a shower, and that we have no hot water to make Yorkshire Gold tea. Can you imagine waking up from those kinds of nightmares? What does it mean? Isn't there like a second psychological meaning to dreams? So here's the Bill of Rights he wrote. It's so cute. It's on a little plaque there. Water should, and it's in the old script, so it's hard to read, but he's so clever. Water should be heated to the proper temperature. Loose tea is preferred, but if tea bags are served, they should contain large leaves. That's interesting, isn't it? Now, I bought the tea sacks where you can just put your own loose leaves in it, and I pick my own lemon balm from outside and lemon mint, and I have all kinds of herbs, and I can make whatever I want and put them in those tea sacks. And I often chop them up with a little pair of kitchen scissors. A small service plate should be provided to hold the used tea bag. I agree. In most places, they don't even think about that. I think they think we're going to let that tea bag just stay in it. Teapots should be made of ceramic, porcelain, or iron to retain the heat. That's so true. So it says here, contributing editor, this is Tea Time Magazine, ladies. You know, Tea Time Magazine and Victoria are great educational resources. If you want a little extra for your homeschool, they have so much history in them, and they take them to old places and a tea room here. You don't have to go anywhere, but you can, and they leave all the recipes in here. So and they also, like this one on the famous paintings, you know, they've got those in there. So that's really nice. He's a master blender for Elmwood Inn Fine Teas and tea historian for the Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum. His name is Bruce Richardson. He is the author of numerous tea books available at elmwoodinn.com. Well, that's interesting. I'll see if I can remember to put that on for you, ladies. So now I'm going to read from Mrs. Cumner, Lady Cumner, when she pulled, what do they call it here? They draw them in on the carpet or something like that. What's that called when they lay down the law to somebody? Something to do with the carpet. I don't know what, but so she says, and I quoted this to you last time for a reason. It was when Claire did not know what her daughter was doing, which, you know, nothing's new under the sun, and girls always have had a way of living a secret life, or just not being careful and not thinking about what they're doing, and not particularly trying to make it a secret, but just, you know, neglecting to think about it. Lady Cumner said, "Now, Claire, when I think a thing, I say it out loud. I don't beat about the bush." Okay, so what is beating about the bush? And this is where I love figures of speech and explanations, because they enrich the meaning of something or help the meaning to sink in better. Well, there was I don't know if it's old or if they still do it, but the hunters would hire someone to beat around a bush with a stick to flush out the fowl, whatever fowl was in there that they wanted to bag. And so when they flushed them out, then the hunter would catch them. And so when you beat around the bush, this is part of your homeschooling, ladies. Did you know you could homeschool yourself if you think you missed out on something. Just read a lot of things, make a workbook for yourself, make a little speech about it, write a diary about it, and start to educate yourself. You can order homeschool books too. And I always recommended a few homeschool sites that you can find good books. But this one, Beat Around the Bush. When you beat around the bush, you're trying to get other people to flush out the meaning without saying it directly. So the people wouldn't run in, the people that were beating around the bush, trying to get these birds to fly out, weren't reaching in there directly to get one. They're trying to flush them out and let someone else catch them. So when you beat around the bush in a point you want to make, you're hoping that the recipient will flush out the meaning somehow, even though you're not direct. And I'm the terriblest person at that. If people aren't direct with me, I just don't get it. I'm just like, don't know what they're talking about, or I just don't get it. So she says, what was it? When I think something, I say it out loud. Let me read it again. When I think a thing, I say it out loud. I don't beat about the bush. So that's an ancient, almost ancient saying, I don't beat about the bush. And that's what I hope that I'm doing here. And I do want to be polite at the same time, but it's sometimes difficult. Now I want to go to homemaking because there are things that, and you can go online. There's no excuse to be a poor homemaker or not to like it, because you can go online now. Lots of free YouTube videos where people show you how to do things, and you can even take complete courses in different kinds of food preparation, or taking care of your house and the arrangement and making it a pleasant place to be. And this is, of course, what our goal is, just to be wanting to be there rather than anywhere else. And after you get your home the way you want it, you don't really want to go anywhere else, because it's better. Everything is convenient. You don't have to try to find hot water or persuade someone how to make hot tea. You can do it yourself. And you have everything you need. And this is my goal, is just get what I need and hunker down here and do all the things that I've ever dreamed of. And so some hindrances to homemaking is, one of the problems is we want to feel important. And this is difficult because you don't automatically feel important. And I think that it has to be something that you feel that the home is important, and that makes you important. The work at home is important. It's important to keep the house the way that it would glorify God and teach others. Like I mentioned, Titus 2:5, 1 Timothy 5:14, that was talking about keepers at home. How does what we do at home, how does the way we take care of it prove the keepers at home idea? How does it prove it? How does it show? We're supposed to be proving the Word of God and testing it, and let's see if it works. Let's just get as close to the model as we possibly can. How does the way we make it look? How does the way we take care of it, and the way we make it, provide the comforts and even the manners and the things that we teach, how does it show? How does it enact Titus 2:5 and 1 Timothy 5:14 and other scriptures? And think about that for a minute. And another thing is, we don't want people to think we are without intelligence and without talent. But you can use intelligence and talent in the home, just like I do with things that I pick up and read and talk about. And how some of you who have worked away from home and you've been in a business, and that's not forever either. People will always tell us back in the day, that back in the 1950s, you needed something to, quote, fall back on in case your husband died or he was injured or he left you. And they would just really pump that into us, and we'd go to the colleges and we'd get degrees, and then we'd go get jobs and everything. And you notice, those of you who have ever done that, you'll notice on the walls of the halls, there's pictures of the president, the vice president, the secretary, the and people in charge of certain things in this business, all up and down the halls, and then the founder, the former people, and everything like that. Have you ever thought of how the home can do that? Pictures, photographs of each member of the family with a little label on it. One, it is the lady of the house, the man of the house, the young master, the young mistress, the young whatever, the children of the house. And line your halls with pictures too. That's what we used to do until the decorators came along and they said, oh, get those pictures off of the hall, because that was our gallery. The hall was our gallery. That's where we hung our family pictures. And but we really need them there because we're in great competition with the business working world, because you go and see, you visit any store or anything, and they'll have a picture of the founder or a picture of some of the workers, because you'd have worker of the week or something like that. And we need to line our halls with the members of the firm. And the other thing is we also are pressured by time. And if you work outside the home, and you say, well, I can still get my housework done, I can still pursue my talents, maybe I like to have certain things that I like to pursue. But anybody can rush home after work and go on this stress cleaning, stress catch-up thing and get it all done and say, see, I can manage. But what you're doing is you're not taking the time, you're eliminating the time for thought and the time to take care of things that's really needed to understand and put emotion into your home and love. And you don't understand that unless you had time to do it. And you can watch other people that do have time, how they take their time. When you're not taking your time, you make more mistakes. And if you're tired, you make more mistakes. So that is one of the threats against homemaking, is the time. So anybody can rush through and clean at the last minute, but it doesn't mean that it is well done, and it doesn't mean that it's thoughtfully done. It doesn't mean you have time to think about what you're doing and how you're doing it. Okay, and then we talked last time about some of these things too, things that can interfere with your happiness at home and with a sense of well-being. And one of them is anxiety. We have discussed the fact that anxiety is this cortisol-producing stress hormone that everyone seems to be suffering from today. And we have looked at what could be the cause of it and how to overcome it. So I wanted to read to you again Philippians chapter 4. We're all excited about Philippians 4:8, that talks about thinking about, put in your mind the things that are true, lovely, and honorable, and just, and all that. And kind of overlook the first part, which says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. And then it says, whatever's true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, and commendable, and excellent, and worthy of praise, think about these things. And it says, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. So if these things produce peace, then what does lack of these things do? Well, it produces anxiety, because it starts out with, do not be anxious, and then it tells you how not to be anxious. And the first thing was prayer. Increase your prayer. The second thing was thanksgiving. Increase your thanksgiving. You might, excuse me just a minute, you might think, well, what can I be thankful for? But start with something small and increase your thanksgiving to God and to others around you, and you'll find that some of the anxiety is relieved. So if these things relieve anxiety or prevent anxiety, then what does lack of these things, lack of practicing prayer, lack of practicing thanksgiving, do? Well, it would produce more when it allows it to come in. If thinking on truth and honor and justice and purity and loveliness and whatever is commendable and thinking on excellence and worthy things and praiseworthy things, if that eliminates or lowers or prevents anxiety, what does lack of these things do? So you could spend a whole unit at my school at Ashcombe studying chapter 4 of Philippians. So it says, practice these things and the God of peace will be with you. Well, you know, no one is born knowing how to play the piano, at least no one I know. So they have to practice. They learn it one note at a time, don't they? So practice these things mean you have to practice. Let's start with truth. Let's practice finding truth. Let's practice truth and understanding it, and let's practice it for a little while. And then let's practice. And when you practice something, you're trying it out. You're mulling over it over and over until it becomes a second mindset. And so the word practice, it's like, yes, we're practicing on everyone, but at least we're practicing. And so you can study that for yourself. That's one of your assignments, is to practice these things. And that's Philippians chapter 4. Moving right along here, I hope you have something that you're doing that is worthwhile, and you'll notice also, I notice also too, I can just feel a little bit, not anxious, but I feel a sense of irritation or something, and I realize that so much needs to be done, and of course it bothers me to see something that needs to be sorted or cleaned or done or put away. It bothers me, so then I'll feel the anxiety. But once you start moving and you start putting things away or sorting through something, that it settles the brain somehow. Another thing that interferes with your homemaking and your sense of well-being at home is when someone attacks your belief and your way of life right in your home, or even when you're out. And so that is something that can be very upsetting. But may I suggest that what you say in response can upset you more than listening to what they say. Actually, your response and your defense can sometimes rattle you more than what they say. And so what I would suggest you do is shut down the voice and then do the choice. If they're not listening and they're trying to get in an argument or they're trying to upset you, don't answer. Just keep washing the dishes. Just keep folding the towels. Then get the broom out and start sweeping the floor right in front of them when they're starting to complain or attack. Let's just start working. Another thing that I think that is really important, I think, for the home and for children, is start them early writing letters to each other at home. And I knew a family that did that, and their sons and daughters had little post office boxes. They were just from the craft store, and they were set in certain places, and they would write letters to each other and put them in their post office box. And then at some time when the homeschool section was over in the day, the mother would say, okay, now you can go check your mail. And she may have written to them too. I used to pretend that our house was a ship, and I would put a ship's newsletter on a little tray with something to eat in the morning before they were quite awake, and they had a little newsletter, and the newsletter would say, today what we're doing, and maybe a little quote from something, or I would draw something, and I just enjoyed that so much. And those were in the days before we even had where most people did not have a home printer. We didn't have our own anything, and I had to handwrite them. We did have these little spirit duplicators. They smell was really smelly, and you'd have to go to a church office to borrow it, to use it. It's just such a pain. But yes, I used to put little ship's newsletters in our house. And then we don't want people to think that we're out, don't have intellect, and that we always have to be proving ourselves. But the best thing is to shut down the voice and work the choice. Go and do what you say you have a choice to do. Just keep doing it, and don't rush. If we're plagued by having to rush, we can't do a thoughtful, good job. We just feel like it's a mechanical thing. We've got to get this job out of the way. It just blows your head up, really. And so I want to maybe read a little bit to you now that I've got that business out of the way. And the first thing I want to do is remind you of Peter Marshall's, of Catherine Marshall's book, The Best of Peter Marshall. She has his sermons in here, and the one that I was reading to was When Queens Ride By. I looked that up to see if they had released the movie of it that was done in, I think it was 1960 something. And it was one of the Loretta Young shows. And the Loretta Young shows were stories, and she would play a different character or other people, and they had When Queens Ride By on there. And that was the story of the woman that was talking to Jenny, who was busy trying to hurry up and get the apples picked so she could sell them, and they could pay their mortgage on the farm. And the woman that dropped by to while her husband fixed her car, and told the story of a queen that overcome hard times by looking her best and going through the town to show people that all was well, and what an effect it had on this woman. And it's the same with us at home. And I think that if there's ever been any kind of unpleasantness, I think it really is good to refresh yourself and remind yourself that it's part of this thing, that when there's rumors in the kingdom that things are not well, we need to show a good sight. Okay, so in this sermon, Keepers of the Springs, I had read it to you before, and I liked what he said about the emancipation of womanhood. And he was talking about how backwards the emancipation was, that it actually tried to convince women they need to be emancipated from the natural life of homemaking and caring for their husband and children. And it tried to emancipate them from it. What did it emancipate them from? It just enslaved them to somebody else's schedule and somebody else's agenda and somebody else's narrative and someone else's money. And so it tried to, and they were responsible, this movement was responsible for getting a lot of women out of their home when they might have been more natural at home. And I like what he said here. The emancipation of womanhood began with Christianity over 2,000 years ago. And he says, wherever Christianity has spread for 1900 years, and I believe that he meant by that by the Word of God, for 1900 years, that women have had the most noblest function that life affords. And it's like I said before, you could go to any civilization, any ancient civilization, and go back into Bible times and find that there were countries where women worked, and some of it was forced labor, and some of it was slavery, and some of it was just hard work outside the home. But when Christ came, it was like she was elevated, because it said, while the rest of the world might do this, followers of Christ can be keepers at home. The women can be keepers at home, and it set her apart. It set her above it all and gave her a place that she could excel and shine in without competition. Because at work, of course, I mentioned all those pictures on the wall, of former employees and former founders and stuff. Those jobs can all be lost. They can be fired. They have to quit when they get a certain age. But the job at home no one can replace you. You're not easily replaced. It's yours because you created it. You're the head of the running the kitchen, and you're the head of a lot of women back in the olden days handled the finances of the home, and they knew that the success of the home was largely up to them, and that they had to take time to do it. But he says that it remained for the 20th century in the name of progress, in the name of tolerance, in the name of broad-mindedness, in the name of freedom, to pull her down from her throne of the home and try to make her like a man. She wanted equality. For 1900 years she had not been equal. She had been superior. But now, they said, she wanted equality. In order to obtain it, she had to step down from where she was. And so it is, in the name of broad-minded tolerance, a man's vices have become a woman's. And it says, doesn't she have the right now to work like a man, and act like a man? For is she not a man's equal? Today they call it progress, but tomorrow, oh, you keepers of the springs, they must be made to see it is not progress. No people ever become great by lowering their standards. And he says here, and later on he said, the world is really familiar with smart women. He says, we hear about every other kind of woman, the beautiful woman, the smart woman, the career woman, the talented woman, but we so seldom hear of a good woman and a godly woman. And he said, I believe women come nearer fulfilling their God-given functions in the home than anywhere else. It is a much nobler thing to be a good wife than to be a Miss America. And I believe there's an old video somewhere where even Donald Trump, when he was still in the construction world, said that the woman at home contributed more, he thought, than even the women in the jobs. And if you can find it, let me know. It's there somewhere. It is far more important to be old-fashioned than to be ultra-modern. And I remember I had made a wardrobe of dresses from current fabric, current produced fabric, and was a pattern that was just from a couple years ago. It wasn't anything old-fashioned, but I had made these dresses to wear on a little holiday that we had. And the place where we were staying, someone said, your wife is old-fashioned. But really, the stuff I was wearing was quite modern. But they say old-fashioned. It says that we have to have Christian education, and we have to have women who are willing to sacrifice the time to do it. It says, the things of life can never be taught to a child unless the mother herself knows them and practices them every day. If you have no prayer life yourself, it's rather a useless gesture to make his child say his prayers every night. So, ladies, I thought you would enjoy that because I'm going to move on here to something else. And so we'll move on to Simple Social Graces by Linda Lichter, and I hope you're getting something done. I've been here 43 minutes, it looks like. And I liked her chapter called Keep a Civil Tongue. And she reckoned in this book that in the century that we're in now, that the words that people speak determine their actions. And I believe there's a scripture like that. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So what he says indicates what's in his heart. Out of the mouth comes the abundance of the heart. Whatever comes out of the mouth. And she believed that the Victorians believed this. This book is a comparison of the Victorian era and our era, and what we have lost. And but we don't have to lose it at home. At home, you can do what you want. You can create your own atmosphere at home. You don't have to be like the rest of the world. You can dress you like. You can listen to what you want to listen to. You can talk about what you want to talk about. And that's the beauty of homeschooling. Even if you don't have children, you can homeschool yourself, and you can live in the era, in the realm that you want to. Um, so here's something that Charles Dickens wrote, and it's hard to understand. She's very, very intelligent and erudite, and some of it goes beyond me, but I think I can figure this one out. She quotes Charles Dickens, and it's during an era that the Victorians fought the Darwins and some of the modern thought of things. They fought it, they fought socialism, and they fought a lot of other things that didn't include God, and they were always warning people about it. And in the beginning, she talked about how the moderns wanted to smash everything that was civil and Victorian, and she said they just set about, and smashing it they did. And she goes back and shows what they were always trying to do. There is no fundamental difference between man and the higher animals in their mental qualities, wrote Charles Darwin in 1859 in his book Origin of the Species. I always hate to quote him because it could be an influence on someone. Regardless of whether they rejected the theory of evolution outright as a godless doctrine, certainly on the whole the Victorians believed it was the duty and challenge of mankind to rise triumphantly from the primordial sludge. So even though they said, we all began with amoeba, Victorians believed that we're going to rise above it. We're not going to stay there and act like we're animals. We're above all that. So while our own age celebrates man's animalistic nature, the Victorians looked to manners, morality, and chivalry to humanize nature's most brutal law, survival of the fittest. Yes, and in society, the survival of the fittest was, if you were polite, you'd get a lot further along in life. And I have read this to you before, but it's always good to practice it, So she starts, there's chapter 7 is called Keep a Civil Tongue. I love that phrase, because if someone gets going on something that's very unsavory or rude, I'll just say keep a civil tongue. Of course, no one knows what that means anymore, but that's a phrase we need to relearn. Keep a civil tongue. For the Victorians, the intersecting layers of language and life were complex. They believed the tongue guided the behavior. And of course, the scriptures teach that. The Word of God teaches that. The tongue is a fire, and it's a small bit that guides a great body, and it can't be tamed unless unless you get your mind under the law of Christ and become self-controlled. Self-control was taught. The individual who gives himself up, it says the Victorians, the intersecting layers of language and life were complex. In 1837, the popular etiquette author William Alcott said, the individual who gives himself up to the use of improper or unchaste language, or even to the endurance of it unchecked. So many of us would just be quiet. We don't want to start something, so we just kind of cringe at something someone says. Is giving up at the same time the outposts of all human virtue. The vices are all associated, and they who have been introduced to either, or especially to all of these, are likely to become acquainted with others and perhaps the whole brotherhood of them. He's saying if you let just one little vice come in, you become acquainted with all their brothers. Let us therefore be aware of improper or indelicate word or look. For it is out of the abundance of these that not only the mouth speaks, but the hand acts. Any who doubt that language drives behavior should consider a recent case in which the effects of language were literally incendiary. So she has a little section here called Searching for Rules of Discourse. And she puts it in the responsibility of women and the home. Nowhere is the question of the relationship between verbal and physical abuse more apparent than in our ambiguity about the use of disrespectful language in front of or by women. It's an assault, when someone starts using disrespectful language. It doesn't actually have to be swearing, but it can be discouraging and sour and deliberately placed to make you unhappy. It's an assault in a way without touching you. The Victorians were outraged by the verbal mistreatment of women, but they would likely trace today's epidemic of abuse to women's lost social power and the general decline of civility. So the current penchant for crudity inverts the Victorian notion that carefully weighed words preserved your freedom, especially for women. Alexis de Tocqueville, our most insightful tourist, found it noteworthy that American men had such respect for women's moral freedom that in their very presence a man was careful to keep watch on his tongue for fear that the women would be forced to listen to language which offends them. This is from the book Democracy in America. Vulgarity was always considered awkward. Modern females have lost the vast but intangible power created by giving offense to ladies. And so this is the thing, is that keeping a civil tongue directs the civility in life. But guess what? You can do this at home, and your home can be your own nation. I have also read a little bit from Wives and Daughters. I'm still immersing myself in this and trying to take some screenshots so I can explain some things. But one thing that I watched it for 1 year was I wanted to sketch the costumes. Now, in the 1980s, there were people that were producing really nice clothes, Laura Ashley being one of them, and there were several others that I was fond of at the time, which had it wasn't a Victorian or Edwardian clothing, but it was Victorian Edwardian inspired clothing. In other words, it might have had a little less billowing skirt or sleeve, but it had the same kind of look. And you see Molly in this white dress here, but when Mr. Gibson was taking her as a little girl to the yearly party at the Cumnors, he told her she would have to tell Betty, their hired servant, that she would need a white dress. And so if we were reenacting this, like if I had my daughter home and she was of a young age, we would probably do that as an activity because we both sewed, and we could make her a dress that would be similar, and then we would sit down in the dress and watch more of this, and we would do the Wives and Daughters things. And we did that with Jane Austen. It was always fun to make a cup of tea and sit down in front of some of the Jane Austen videos. And of course we read a great deal. So I want to read more about how Mr. Gibson had gone to the Towers to consult with Lady Cumnor to make sure that the invitation was still there for Molly to come to their annual tea party for the children in the area. And he said, "By the way, I met my lord at the Crosstrees farm yesterday, and he was kind enough to ask my little daughter, who was with me, to be one of the party here on Thursday. It would give the lassie great pleasure, I believe." Now remember, I believe they were Scots. He paused for Lady Cumnor to speak. "Oh, well, if my lord asked her, I suppose she must come, but I wish he was not so amazingly hospitable. Not but what the little girl would be quite welcome, only you see, he met a younger Miss Browning the other day, of whose existence I had never heard." And just as Mr. Gibson was going away, Lady Cumnor called after him, "Oh, by the way, Claire is here. You remember Claire, don't you? She was a patient of yours long ago." "Claire," he repeated in a bewildered tone. "Don't you recollect her? Miss Clare, our old governess," said Lady Agnes, "about 12 or 14 years ago, before Lady Cuxhaven was married." "Oh, yes," said he, "Miss Clare, who had scarlet fever here. A pretty delicate girl, but I thought she was married." "Oh, yes," said Lady Cumnor, "she was. She was a silly little thing, and did not know when she was well off. We were all very fond of her, I'm sure." She went and married a poor curate. I became a stupid Mrs. Kirkpatrick, but we always kept on calling her Claire. And now he has died and left her a widow, and she is staying here, and we are racking our brains to find out some way of helping her to a livelihood without parting her from her little child. She's somewhere about the grounds, if you'd like to renew your acquaintance with her. Thank you, my lady. I'm afraid I cannot stop today. I have a long round to go. I've stayed here too long as it is, I'm afraid. Long as his ride had been that day, he called on the Miss Brownings in the evening to arrange about Molly's accompanying them to the Towers. They were tall, handsome women, past their youth, and inclined to be extremely complaisant to the widowed doctor. Mr. Gibson, we shall be delighted to have her with us. You should never have thought of asking us such a thing. I'm sure I'm hardly sleeping at nights for thinking of it, said Miss Phoebe. You know I've never been there before. Sister has many times, but somehow, though my name has been down on the visitors' list these 3 years, the Countess never named me in her note. And you know I could not push myself into her notice and go to such a grand place without being asked. How could I? So, ladies, I'm going to probably leave you here with that. And one more thing I just wanted to, I've told you about this before, and I don't know where you can get it. It was, I'm trying to think of where it was published, and it's called, and you don't need it, you can, this is for everybody. I wish they'd change the title. The title is How to Draw, Paint, and Craft with Your Creative Grandkids. It should be How to Draw, Paint, and Craft with anybody, because every mother needs this, and every child needs it. It should be for everybody. But one of the things I wished I had learned was how to draw, because we would sit in a church and we'd have paper there, and so one of the children would say, "Draw a house, Mommy, draw a house," and I'd have to draw a house, and they would say, "No, draw it here, draw it there." So I wish that I had known more about drawing, but this is good for children too, and it's called How to Paint and Draw and Be Creative with Your Grandkids, and it shows all the drawing in the front, and there's a rose, and there's this, and you can actually copy all this, and you can make photocopies of it and use it and make their own notebook, and it's all these different things you can do. And I think they even have the homemade clay, which you make with soda bicarb and cornstarch, and how to make paper jewelry. And I'm just going to go through it myself and see what all I can do, and I'll just start a little box or a notebook with all these things in it. So ladies, I hope that this has been edifying for you, that you'll have your tea and that you will make your list, say your prayers, pray for everybody in your family, because they might not be thought about by anybody else. Pray for their success in life and in their spiritual life as well. And thank you for all you do for me, for the encouragement you give. And I know I owe letters and books, and I'm going to be sending them out. You'll just have to be patient with me. But I love you, and thank you for coming. Thank you for your encouragement, and stay close to Christ. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.